Childhood PTSD is, in its essence, an injury to our ability to connect with other people. And if this happened to you, you were robbed of your birthright to be well enough loved and properly guided into the web of human connection that's all around you and on which the richness of your life and even your survival sometimes depend. I know from personal experience that life with complex PTSD doesn't always let us have the love and belonging that are essential to happiness. What's simple for other people, like just being in a group, having a friend, feeling a sense of belonging, or recovering from a conflict with a coworker, these can be so fraught for us. Even in adulthood, the people who become your friends and coworkers and loved ones and your ability to connect with them will likely be the single biggest factor in how your life turns out. Now, thankfully, no matter where we begin, we're all capable of increasing our capacity to love and connect with others, even later in life. But yes, it takes work. We now know that abuse and neglect early in life can literally change your brain and restrict the normal cognitive processes that enable you to seek out and connect with good, appropriate people to bring into your life, to intuitively know how to interact with them successfully, and to detect red flags so you can avoid people who should not be let into your life. The loss of connectivity is the most tragic part of childhood PTSD. To be capable of love, but not to be able to sustain a normal, loving relationship is a devastating price to pay for what happened. But the great news is you can absolutely make progress in this area if you are intentional about it. If you just kind of leave it to chance and hope you'll figure out love later in your life, or maybe when the right person comes along, I'll be honest with you, it's not likely to get better. It turns out that having and growing our connections with other people is one of the most powerful ways that we can heal our trauma. There's a large body of research emerging that shows that loving relationships actually help us heal not just our bodies and not just our emotions, but even our telomeres. Those are the little caps on the strands of DNA in all of our cells, and they protect us from disease and slow down aging. So connection is vital to life. And yes, some feelings of loneliness and disconnection are universal experiences for everyone, at least a little. But for us, it can kind of take over our lives and drain us of anything good. This has everything to do with brain and emotional dysregulation, something very common for people who grew up with trauma that can make connection very difficult. And it has also to do with re-regulation, which makes change in this part of ourselves possible. But for now, put really simply, dysregulation is a tendency that's common in traumatized people and in everyone to some degree to experience nervous system bumpiness when they're under stress. So you might feel panicked or overreactive or discombobulated or numb. Now, being prone to slipping into a dysregulated state can seriously challenge your ability to connect. It's very common for people with childhood trauma. It's hard to read nonverbal cues, for example. It's hard to express emotions in a way that doesn't push people away. And it's hard to handle hurts when your brain and emotions aren't quite aligned with what's happening right in front of you. So dysregulation prevents connections, it puts pressure on connections, and it breaks connections. Re-regulation, and I'll teach you how to do that, puts you in a place where you can learn to grow and maintain and repair connections. So if you've never learned to intentionally get re-regulated, then getting the skills to do it is going to be life-changing. For me, it's been a long process. I was born to loving parents whose alcoholism and addiction set the stage for abuse and neglect for my siblings and me, starting when we were pretty small. And the violence in our house eventually stopped, and there were definitely good things about my family, but the neglect never ended, and I grew up feeling a grinding sense of loneliness and shame and isolation. And I used to think it was me, maybe because we were poor, maybe because our house was so messy, or maybe I was some kind of unlikable kid. And I mean, trauma can make kids kind of edgy, but I think I was a pretty good kid. I was really stressed out all the time, though, about a lot of arguing and tension in the house. And by middle school, I had to kind of fend for myself to scrounge up lunch or clothes or even money for the laundromat. I spent a lot of energy hiding our home situation from other people and hiding all the creepy encounters with potential abusers outside the family. the kind of person that tends to sort of shadow kids who aren't supervised and who don't have clear boundaries. But despite all this, I did okay in my young adulthood. I was fairly accomplished as a student, and I was creative, I was responsible, and I made friends with interesting and exciting people. I had my first long-term relationship, but I couldn't sustain the good things in my life. And by the time I was 30, I'd quit the job and I left the boyfriend, not because I was moving forward, but because I was falling apart. And that core loneliness was getting louder and louder. It made me selfish. It made me mean. Because honestly, I thought the emptiness inside was caused by some failing in the people around me. So, of course, people didn't want to deal with that. They didn't want to deal with anger and unreasonableness and blame, and they left. And I tried to change. I was in therapy for years, and eventually I was in therapy multiple times every week. But the more I talked about it, the worse I got. And then more scared, and then more desperate. Now, there was no name back then for what was going on, but there is now. It's complex PTSD from childhood trauma. This is the kind of post-traumatic stress that comes from chronic, ongoing stress. And this can happen at any stage of life, but CPTSD develops most commonly in kids who are abused and neglected. So you'll hear me say childhood PTSD and complex PTSD almost interchangeably, and I always have to apologize. It drives some people crazy. The crucial turning point was when I learned to heal the number one symptom caused by my trauma, and it's another thing there was no word for back then, and that's dysregulation. If you've taken any of my other courses, you've probably heard the story of how I learned the writing and meditation techniques that were shown to me in 1994, and that, to my incredible surprise, calmed my stressed and hurting mind way, way down, and brought my thoughts and emotions into order. Now, what a game changer. I became calm and clear, and I could finally see what was going wrong in my life and what was really good about me underneath all the guilt and self-attack that I used to direct at myself back then. Now, maybe you feel anxious around people. Maybe past hurts have made it hard to trust. Maybe the shame and invalidation you're carrying from your childhood make it impossible to just be yourself with other people, and you're in fear all the time that you'll say the wrong thing, or that they don't like you, or that you simply don't belong. You think everyone else belongs, but not me. I know that feeling. I spent so much of my life feeling that way, drowning in fear and consumed with resentment, talking about it, trying to get other people to understand how wronged I was, how terrible were the things that happened to me, how unjustly excluded and overlooked I was. And all these things were true at one time, and it felt like talking about it should deliver some kind of healing breakthrough. We all have to talk about painful things sometime, but as you probably found too, it doesn't heal the disconnection. That, I've learned, involves building something you might call connection muscles, emotionally, mentally, and neurologically. Now, rather than trying to run away from people or change them or hate them or cling to them for dear life, I learned to shift my focus onto noticing and calming my triggers. If you don't get triggered, all the other things you do when you're triggered become optional. You can choose to do something different. It's amazing how life opens up to us when we can be at ease with ourselves and confident that whatever happens, we'll know how to deal with it. You don't have to be all better before you start working on connecting. In fact, you need connection to get better, right where you are. If that's at the very beginning of your recovery from early trauma, you need it, because all the other work that you're going to do to heal, the brain healing, learning your triggers, how they cut you off from people, none of this can be accomplished in isolation. So you were born to be connected, and CPTSD can block you from finding any connection, and it can block you from experiencing the connections that are right in front of you. But you can heal. Your healing gets a huge boost when you're making happy progress in your ability to connect with other people, whether it's with a spouse or children or friends or family, or just strangers you meet on the street. You can learn this in small, brave steps. It's not always easy, but as you work at it, you get better at it. It gets easier to enjoy people and be at ease with them. You get better at choosing who you want in your life and who you don't. So there are a lot of forms of help out there that focus on the cause of trauma, what happened to you, the people who hurt you, and how that affected you. And those aspects of your story, they're important, but this course is mostly focused on present time, what symptoms you're having now, what is happening when you start connecting with other people, and how you can do that better. Now, the change begins when you believe that you can do it. You can heal. You can change your life. You can change.